welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name's Ketevan, and this video is going to be a bit all over the place. I'm going to kind of do a mid-month check-in slash reading wrap-up, as well as tell you about like my bookish life that's, you know, kind of impeded my reading a bit, but it's all good because it's all lovely things to report, as well as a little bit of a haul at the end. I think that's everything I'll be doing, but there might be some extra stuff thrown in at the end, who knows. But I'll just dive right into the wrap up. So the first book I read was The Elegance of the Hedgehog by Muriel Barbery, and is translated by Alison. I enjoyed this. I would recommend it. It's a really nice, simple, philosophical story that kind of packs a punch towards the end. We follow two characters, Rheea, who's the gardienne or the concierge of an apartment building that Paloma, who's I think 11 years old, lives in with her family. I really thought they would have more of a relationship. They don't really have any kind of relationship. The majority of the book is Rheea narrating in a very traditional sense, and the Paloma, the little girl, is her, we only get her diary entries. We don't get any sort of like official narration. And the idea is that they're both extremely smart and kind of feel like outsiders, and for various reasons, and this connection they have at the end of the book, I don't want to be like, it's not, yeah, I guess you could say saves them, like, or moves them, I don't know. Yeah, it's a meaningful moment. But the ending was really dissatisfying. It honestly felt, and I hate using this word, I really think it's lazy when people use this word, but honestly I thought it was really derivative. It literally is derivative. Like, she literally took something that happened to somebody in history, I'll say, and had that happen to her character. And that was meant to like mean something as a metaphor, which it does, like I understand that, but it just felt like a really lazy way to end the book because none of the issues had to be resolved. It was just like, oh, well, this happened, so boop, boop, boop. So anyway, I really liked it. I think this is pretty typical of French literature, so I'm not like making any big complaints about it, but I was a bit disappointed with it. Well, you know. And then the next one I have is Family Ties by Clarice Lispector, and this is this copy I bought, it was translated by Giovanni Pontierro, and I was listening to the audio and I realized, like, oops, I have a different translation because it's so hard to tell from when you borrow the audio, and it is very different translations, and I could not tell what was the better one. So I did my research, I couldn't figure it out. This copy is the older one. It's a man, of course, and it uses a lot of curse words, like a lot. And I was like, it would be so weird if like the original text didn't use those words and he just like gratuitously added them in, but it is possible. I don't know. But the newer translation, I think it's Kate Atkinson. I'll put her name in if I remember to later, but she avoided those words quite easily, and it still flowed and it still made sense, and I don't know. So just for that reason, I kind of stopped reading this and listened to just the audio. Translations aside, I did not love this as much as I thought I would, which was kind of a bummer, you know. Clarice Lispector is like very famous, very well known. Lots of people love her. I've heard like that her prose like crackles and like, and I just, nothing crackled for me. I don't know. The stories are all meant to be sort of like chill slice of life. Like nothing externally is happening in the characters. Like it's all their like stream of consciousness and their like realizations and their thoughts and their processing of things. And so like I knew that going in, and I realized that very quickly. And that part didn't bother me. It was just kind of like, I don't know, like underwhelming. So that was kind of a bummer because I really expected to love her. I'm not giving up on her. I'm definitely, this is just one short story collection. I'm going to read probably another and maybe a novel before I like say I don't like her or anything. But yeah, it was, you know, all of them were interesting, but like none of them blew me away and none of them like really made me think. It was more just like, okay, yeah, these characters are going through some stuff. Cool. Moving on, like kind of vibe for me, which was a bummer. So Family Ties. So I have a bunch of books now from the library, and two of them are for my polyamory book series, and so I won't speak much about them, but the first one is How We Show Up by Birdsong, and Set Boundaries, Find Peace by Nedra, Glover, Tawwab. And the first one, How We Show Up, is more about like building community and sort of like recognizing the alternative modes of community that we can utilize aside from like the nuclear family unit, because obviously like Western society wants us all to depend on the nuclear family unit, and that's not ideal for many reasons, and it's also not culturally normal for many people. So it was a really interesting book. It was a lot less self-help than I thought it would be, which was awesome. I really don't like self-help books, and I've been reading a lot of self-help books for this polyamory video series, so it was really refreshing. I really liked that one. And then the Set Boundaries, Find Peace, that one was also good. It was definitely more classic self-help, definitely written for someone who is having a lot of trouble setting boundaries. So there's a lot of like that kind of fluff of like, you can do it, you deserve to set your own boundaries, kind of like, you know, wording, which of course is necessary if somebody's like needing that kind of encouragement or support. But it did also have a lot of really cool discussions in it. So I think even if you don't have issues with boundaries, like personally, it still could be an interesting read. But that's all I'll say about those two, because you'll hear more about them later. And then there was a third book that is technically for my polyamory series, but it's fiction, so I'll briefly talk about it here. So this one is The Body Myth by Rheea Mukherjee. And she's an Indian writer, I believe living in the US, and the book is set in India in a fictional town. I'll try to discuss it from like not the polyamory perspective, because that, I'll just tell you now, that wasn't super inspiring, but whatever, typical, wasn't expecting much more. I've read this like maybe a week ago now, and so I've kind of like been able to calm down a bit, but I had like a very visceral reaction to this book. I was so like repulsed by it, and for completely unrelated to polyamory. So one of the characters has a lot of chronic illnesses, and part of the story arc is like her trying to figure that out. And all of a sudden, at least from my perspective, all of a sudden it's revealed that she's actually faking it. Like she kind of is dealing more with Munchausen's. And as that was happening, as they were discussing it, I was like, what is happening? Like, this is, you know, as someone who's chronically ill and has had to have these fights with doctors over and over again, I was like, wait, she's not actually really sick and she's just making it all up? Like she's the reason we all get accused that we're making it up? Like, it was just like I had such a like visceral reaction. And then of course, since I picked it up because it was a polyamory book and I was just like, sure, it's about polyamory, I'll add it to the list, I didn't even bother reading the synopsis. And of course it says that in the synopsis, like that like our main character suspects her of faking her illness. So I should have been not surprised by that, but I was. So once I kind of like had some time to let go of that, I was able to say like, okay, cool. It was a pretty decent book, literary wise, but yeah, so I enjoyed it. It was really interesting. You know, themes of obviously chronic illness and disability and you know, belonging and identity wrapped up in relationships. All that good stuff was a part of this book. But essentially the book follows Muriel, who's a widow, a very recent widow, and she meets this couple and ends up falling in love with both of them. And that's all I'll say about it. Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much all I want to say about that, because I'm gonna be dissecting it in another video. But yeah, it was overall pretty good. I think I gave it 3 or 4 stars, so decent. So I read Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens with Becky from Teacup the Storyteller and a few other booktubers. I'll link their channels down below. And it was not for me. I did not enjoy it. I suspected that, which is why, you know, it took me so long to read it. But, you know, my mom had said like the movie was great and that she enjoyed the book. So I was like, well, if I want to see the movie, I should read the book, you know. But it was really not for me. I don't want to go too much into it, but especially since I think I'm gonna make another video about ecofeminism and how books kind of like integrate that. So we'll see. You'll hear more from me about this book in that video. So the last book I finished was Tracy Flick Can't Win by Tom Perrotta. This one is a sequel to Election, which I discussed in my last wrap-up video. It was good. I definitely enjoyed it. I didn't even realize that Election was actually meant to be a response to the election in 1992, the American presidential US election. But now that I've read that, I'm like, oh, that makes total sense. And similarly, Tracy Flick Can't Win is sort of a response to the Me Too movement. It is a little clunky in places. It's a little obvious in some places. It's not quite as subtle as Election was, but I do think it's worth a read, and I think it's excellent. It discusses racism, sexism, transphobia, gun control, what else? Lots, just like all the top issues that you've heard of that are like major issues in the United States. This book synthesizes it in a really fun, quick-paced novel that is not depressing to read. Like, it obviously all the topics are depressing, but you know, it has this lighthearted tone that makes it a lot more palatable to like digest and reflect on, rather than just being like a doom and gloom kind of novel. So in that sense, I think it was really successful. Like, it's gonna get people thinking about these topics who maybe wouldn't have thought about it before. However, I do think that like he is trying to do a lot, like literally all those topics. They are woven in pretty seamlessly in the sense that it all makes sense. Sort of, but there are a couple things where it's like you kind of just add that in, just have it in there. So yeah, it was really interesting. I definitely like read it very quickly, and I really thought that it had like an important message that was enjoyable to consume. It's a good book if you're like, oh, I want to like kind of read a little bit about that, but don't really want to like drown myself in sorrows type of vibe. So that's Tracy Flick Can't Win, and that's the last book I think I've read until now, this moment in time. I had so many bookish events happening this week. So the first was I went to a new book club to discuss Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk, I think. And I really love this book club. I think it's going to become one of my mainstay book clubs. It was a really fun conversation about the book, but it wasn't just sitting around talking about the book. Love that perfect balance. And I really enjoyed the discussion with everyone else. So that was the first bookish event. And then the second was that I actually got 2 visits from fellow booktubers. So the first was Sandy from Miss Reads a Lot. She was on vacation here. I'm sure you're gonna hear about it on her channel. And since we were discussing our buddy read that we're gonna be doing in November, you know, she was like, hey, do you wanna go book shopping with me? And I was like, yes, of course, always wanna go book shopping, for sure. So I got, I put myself on a very strict budget with her, because we were only going to like new bookstores, and I was like, I need 1 book max. And so I found 1 book, and it was The Third Man and the Fallen Idol, which are 2 novellas by Graham Greene. So I found this at San Francisco Book Company, but we also went to Shakespeare and Abbey and Red Wheelbarrow, all the big 4. And I saw a lot of books, but I was good. I was strict with myself and just got the 1, which was cool. But then later on, Anne from Anne Novella came to visit, and I was not as strict. So I was strict in terms of like a new book. I only bought 1, same thing. It's called Sisters of the Revolution, a feminist speculative fiction anthology. So this I found in a new to me bookstore. We met up at a bookstore I'd never been to. It's called After 8 Books, which is a publisher, and then they also have a bookstore sort of like as their storefront where they sell their books and also other books of a similar genre. Very feminist, as you can guess. So this one has like a really interesting mix of super famous names that I of course have heard of, and I'm sure you have as well, and also names I've never heard of. So this one is speculative fiction, but it is inclusive in terms of it has science fiction, fantasy, horror, and more. And it's also from the 1960s to the present day. So it's kind of more modern. So I'm really excited to get to this, and I'm really happy I found it in the bookstore that I just discovered in my own city. So that was really cool. And then we went to my favorite place, Bouligny. It's a chain of used bookstores that have very, very inexpensive books. The one by my house is really cheap, like €1 to €2. And then the one we were at was actually much more expensive. I was kind of surprised, but the deals are still really good. So the first book I found was, it says For Esme with Love and Squalor, but it's actually just 9 stories by J.D. Salinger. I think the British publication has a different title, but same thing. So I've never read this and I thought I'd pick it up, check it out. And then the next one I got was The Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler. I've definitely started noticing the vintage crime imprint that has been that puts out classic crime books, and I'm really enjoying them, so I thought pick this one up. It's classic. And then this one was a bit more of a wild card. It's called The Kingdom of This World by Alejo Carpentier. Not sure. Oh yeah, of course, it's Haitian. So, sorry, the book is Haitian, so of course it's Carpentier. And then it's translated by Harriet de Onis. And I'll read the back. A few years after its liberation from French colonizing rule, Haiti experienced a period of unsurpassed brutality, horror, and superstition under the reign of the Black King Henri Christophe. Through the eyes of the ancient slave Tinoel, The Kingdom of This World records the destruction of the Black regime built on the same corruption and contempt for human life that brought down the French. In an orgy of voodoo, race hatred, erotomania, and fantastic grandeurs of false elegance. Wow, okay. So that sounds super interesting. I definitely just quickly checked the Goodreads review, so I'm not even sure anything about this book, but I thought it'd be a nice option. And it's really short, so... and apparently owned by Sienna at one point in time. And then the last one, again, a bit of a whim, wasn't sure, but I'm really trying to get into plays, and I have a little stack of plays on my bookshelf, and I haven't been reading them this year, but I want to. And I realized that all the plays on there are basically written by white men. And so this is just a collection of Black and Asian plays. It's an anthology, it doesn't even have an editor. The press is called Aurora Metro Press, which is a super indie press that I've never heard of before. So one of them, A Young Indian Man, so Harvest by Manjula Padmanabhan. It's a young Indian man decides to sell his body parts for cash, and it's now a major film. Made in England by Parv Bansal, not sure. A witty, gritty story of the breakup of a punk band when 20-something Bali swaps his guitar for a sitar and reinvents himself as Billy India. Okay. Brother to Brother by Michael Macmillan. A verbal tapestry of interwoven stories exploring the experience of being Black and male in Britain. Calcutta Kosher by Shelley Silas. Set in the Indian Jewish community in Calcutta, it's a moving drama about a dying old woman who summons her 2 daughters from abroad to tell them that Maki, the servant girl, is her half-sister. Ooh, interesting. Under the Influence by Wayne Buchanan. Randolph is in a hospital, convicted murderer. His doctors unravel the incidents leading to the murder and his mental collapse. So yeah, Black and Asian plays. I think this will be really interesting for me to sort of expand my play repertoire, so to speak. And that's my haul. Yeah, and I think that's everything I wanted to talk about today. I didn't add anything on at the end. Thank you so much for joining me in this video and listening to all my rambling about different bookish things happening in my life. I had a lot of fun chatting with you about them. If you've read anything good lately, or if you're reading anything good, drop it down in the comments below. You know, I always want recommendations. And if you've had any good book club experiences, I want to hear about them. I feel like I've been on this hunt for a book club for a really long time, and I have one that's pretty good, but I want more book clubs. So let me know your experiences with any book clubs down below. And until next time, bye.